The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have something a little bit different for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and Light Fair, May 4th through 8th. We will see you guys there.
And it's also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got a lot of information, including what we're going to talk about today, information about the NAILD Lighting Specialist in Controls certification, which is going to be happening virtually May 13th, May 20th, May 27th, as well as in person June 16th through 18th. All three of these dates are mandatory. There's a lot of information on our website now if you go to nailed.org/LS-C, you will learn a lot. We'll have a link in the description too, but there's a lot of information out there on this certification. So check it out if you want to learn about the certification, but we're also going to talk about the certification now. All three of us are technically guests because we are all three the instructors for this certification. There are three tracks. There's lighting design, or lighting controls design, there's lighting controls distribution, and there's lighting controls installation. And so we have these little monikers, LSC S, LSC D, LSC I, and those are the three different tracks. And they're all going to happen concurrently, so you can't take all three at the same time. You can only take one track, and we'll have an accelerated version of this for people who want to flesh it out and take all tracks in the future. But right now we're only doing it so you can only pick one. But what we're going to do here is we're actually going to talk about what we're doing with these tracks, what the goal here is, and maybe some information about how you can choose which track to take. And so just to kind of give people a little bit of opportunity, they heard our voices. I'm Webster. Ron's the other co-host of this show, but we also are here with Chris O'Shea. And Chris, do you mind just giving us a very brief introduction for yourself so that we can then go into kind of describing what we're doing here with this training?
Sure. Chris O'Shea. I work with a company by the name of Control Force. We are strictly a service company, and I've been involved in the commissioning and installation, the startups, training, of installations for 30 years now. And I think I got a pretty good grasp on the roadblocks and pitfalls that typically beset an installation. And we're going to talk about some of the things we can do to get over that or get through it, and what contractors or installers need to look for when they're doing a lighting control installation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the purpose of this training, I mean, we're not necessarily going to teach everybody everything under the sun, but we are going to teach them enough so that they can oversee those kinds of projects that just don't have any oversight whatsoever. We are kind of focusing on distributors with this, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other people that couldn't benefit from this kind of certification and training, because ultimately the goal here is also to open it up so that anybody can really utilize the resources here and identify who's certified in what. And so the first thing here, which is what I'm going to be the instructor for, is the design, which is the LSCS for specialist, which because we couldn't use D twice, the LSCD is the distribution one. But so the specialist is really the design track, and that's going to help you understand when you are put onto a project and there is nothing in the drawings, the documentation, what pertaining to the lighting controls, and somebody says, I need a lighting control system. What do you do in that situation? And so that's what the specialist track is going to help you understand and be able to go forward and provide really good, simple documentation for those projects. We're not going to teach you, how to do these huge, large scale DMX color changing effect type projects. We're just going to teach you
Oh,
simple
shucks.
installation. I know, right? But you still need documentation, regardless of how small the project is. You still need that documentation, because that specialist is going to then hand their documentation on over to the distribution person, who Ron is going to be instructing.
Yeah. So, in the distribution, we're really going to focus on, on how do you sell the lighting control system, right? How much do you need to stock with the lighting control system, and then actually coordinating the lighting controls before they move on to that next step. So, I think Webster brought up a great point, and it's it's important to remember that while this is being put on by NAILD, this is not something that is necessarily specific to distributors, right? This is open to anybody who wants. There is a way to sign up as a non-NAILD member to be a part of this, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to take a look if you're new into lighting controls and getting into this, because there, whether you're focusing on the distribution track, the design, or the installation, isn't going to matter. Wherever you want to focus, there's going to be a lot to learn. Myself, I'm not a distributor, I'm a dealer. It is a very similar market, right? There are very unique differences between a distributor and a dealer. But from the aspect of selling the system, stocking the system, making sure the documentation and everything is square, and then, coordinating it before it gets to that next step, that is completely all encompassing, no matter who you are, whether you're a distributor, you're a dealer. Those steps are the exact same. The only major
Or even a
difference
sales rep.
is, absolutely, the only major difference really is in the distribution channel. Your stocking levels are going to be very different from what I would keep, or a rep who wouldn't keep any stock, right? But
Right.
the other sides of that are universal to everybody. And so I would encourage anyone to just at least take a look. And if it's something you're interested in, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out, whether it's to Chris or Webster or myself, anybody. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you about this entire track, and how it could benefit you and your career. And so, we'll go through that, and I'll put on my sales face, and we'll go through the whole thing and how you interact with a customer. And it's not just working with the customer on the sales side, it's also working with the designer and working with
Hmm.
the specialist who put the package together, to get an understanding of what their intent was and their thought, to make sure that you're selling the correct equipment, not just selling equipment, right? You need to be able to make sure that that is a cohesive system that is going to work, and you're not just selling something that doesn't make sense. So having that basic understanding is going to be super important.
And then, so once you purchase and deliver that equipment to the job site, now this is when the installation track kicks in. And so, Chris, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I will share with you our first comment about this business is, don't tell me what was specified, don't tell me what was sold, tell me what you have on your job site. So let's start with that. But I think what occurred to me as I was listening to Ron is that um, I have a way of saying that this really is installation. So, maybe it favors contractors or electricians. But I think what we're all saying is that it helps everybody to understand a little bit about each one of these modules. That
Yes.
maybe it helps an installer to know how a project is sold. Maybe it helps a salesperson to know how a project is specified. But we all know that at the end of everything, it's the installer, let's say the electrician, that's got to make this work. And
Hmm.
and another one of our favorite comments about this business is that we feel the electrician is the only one on the job site that's really paying attention to all the paperwork. That you got design teams focused on design paperwork, you got GCs focused on air conditioning and all that kind of stuff. It really comes down to the electrician, who's the one who's trying to put all the facts together. And unfortunately, it's usually the last thing they deal with on a job, because there's so many things they're more familiar with that are very comfortable to do while they're trying to figure out what to do with their control system. So our goal is to look at the different ways manufacturers provide their equipment. When you talk about power devices, Some people use room controllers. Some people use power packs. There are still dimmer panels, good old-fashioned dimmer panels out there, power panels.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different options available, and that's not only for power controls, but also emergency controls. Electricians have to be aware of how the emergency lighting is being handled, and oftentimes there's transfer or bypass devices involved in the process. And not only do you have to know how to deal with those, but they also have their installation differences. Again, some come in screw cover enclosures, some come mounted to a junction box, some are nipple mount. So it's about a little bit about understanding the differences. My favorite term is dimmer switch. If I hear dimmer switch again, is it a dimmer or a switch? Which is it? Right? But everybody calls it a dimmer switch. And what they're really talking about is a keypad, right? And a wireless dimmer just means that the communication is wireless. It's not a Tesla dimmer. You still have to give it power. But there are wireless keypads that only use batteries. So, every manufacturer has their way of looking at things. And we're trying to put that all together in a way that we don't expect you to really understand the details, but to be familiar with the terms and the applications of the product.
Yeah.
But there will be, at the end of this session, a practical exam. You will be expected to know how to put a system together. We'll give you a scope and parameters, and you'll have to perform that practical exam. So that's certainly something we'll be clear about as we move forward.
That is for the installation track only. But yes, the practical is going to be part of that. You're going to have to show how you install and program some devices. And, going on that point that you had about terminology, that is another thing that we really are trying to coordinate here, is making sure that the terminology is consistent throughout all three tracks and throughout all the presentations that are going to be done by the manufacturers, because we also have endorsing manufacturers involved in this project, so that not only are you going to be trained in just generic information, but you're also going to be trained in specific to manufacturer information.
Yep. And
they may have different terminology, but that way, if you have a glossary of definitions, you can then look at that glossary. Okay, they say power pack, that's what that means. And this is how it applies to other systems if I'm comparing it. But, we have 4 great brands involved in this, and they all have something to offer to this kind of track where you're really, trying to do a simple lighting control system, and you just want to make sure it goes flawlessly. That is what we're trying to teach you on. And going back to the installation track, Chris, just, hopping into your past experience. I mean, there's a lot of lighting control systems that have evolved over the years. And, when we're training people on how to do installation, there are a lot of components that are pretty consistent. And so, from a heuristic standpoint, like, what are some things that we're going to cover in this?
Well, certainly a little bit of the evolution. And that includes not only what we consider architectural lighting and controls, but entertainment as well, because some of what is on the market today came from the theatrical community as much as it did from the architectural community. So I think it behooves us to discuss that. But it really is trying to show that everyone's not really that far apart. That it's a matter of, for example, we look at equipment 4 different ways: power, control, distribution, and fixtures. And when we talk about distribution, what we're talking about is it traditional 2-wire phased in? Is it 0 to 10? Is it dolly? What is the wire, the communication wire that you have to use? So to understand maybe the history of control systems, how they developed, and maybe not only here in the States, but nationally, certainly is a part of it. I think that the unfortunate aspect of what we're doing is we don't really have the time to really put an in-depth exposure on that. I think that because we're trying to do this in the module we're trying to do it in, that we're going to discuss some general concepts, but immediately focus on how that affects what's going on today. So
Yeah.
today's world in 2025, completely different than it was, back in the 1990s, certainly. So
Mhm.
I think it's important to understand where this business comes from, but I think that we're clearly in a different market today than we were before. And I think that's
Absolutely.
why contractors need to be more familiar with how that's changed or evolved over time.
Well, and I think that's a really good point because, a lot of people still assume the same thing that has, where lighting controls had been in the past, it's the same thing nowadays, and that's not the case. Again, there are some similarities in fundamentals, like, okay, yeah, you still need a hardwire power to the dimmer because
Mm-hmm.
the you don't have wireless dimming, you have wireless signal. But at the same time, everything else for the most part is different than it was 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
so, we really do want to make sure that we're educating people on modern practices, not historic practices.
Yeah, imagine anybody who remembers when dimmer panels used to come with a work light and a time clock and a convenience outlet and all sorts of accommodations for outlets and everything. They were completely custom made, and now of course you're down to a device per switch leg.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kind of going into that topic with distribution as well. I mean, distribution has changed over the years, and now it kind of has a different function in construction projects than it used to. And so, what are the challenges that somebody who may have been doing distribution for years and years and years, what might they gain from taking a certification like this?
Yeah, so I would say, some of the biggest changes just in the industry have really affected distribution because what you used to look at on a drawing set, while people may still use the same symbols they used, the systems
Hmm.
are not the same. So
Right.
having an understanding of the system that was specified, or if there's no specified system and it's a generic, here's a motion sensor, here's a switch, here's this, here's that, being able to look at those and then understand, okay, given this hopefully sequence of operations and this scope and this documentation, I can put together this needs to be a wireless system, this needs to be a
Mhm.
wired, or this is something that I can go back to centralized panels, or am I going into triple LC? And so having just that basic understanding of how to read that project documentation and where to go to. And I think that's part of what makes distribution difficult, right? Is you're
Mhm.
touching both sides, right? You are stuck in the middle. You have to be able to interpret those drawings and be able to work with that specialist, that designer, and get an understanding of what they were trying to get across if it's not clear. And then you have to put all that together, make sure you have a complete cohesive system, and then get it to the field, to the installers. And hopefully you've had some conversations with them and they may be on your own team, right? We're not necessarily
Mhm.
saying that these are three different entities. This could all be within one organization, right? You need to be able
Absolutely.
to work with that last part and work with the installers, and whether you are a distributor or they're part of your team, there's going to be back and forth. The contractor's going to call you and say, hey, this thing doesn't work, this room changed, this or that. There's going to be those conversations. So you have to make sure that you've really got a solid design up front and that you've accounted for all of those devices. And, you didn't miss plug loads in the walls and things like that that need to be accounted for by code. And just making sure that all that's covered and putting the installer in the best position possible to have a
Mhm.
successful project. Because unfortunately, if the installer has an unsuccessful project, it's going to make its way back to you. It's going to make its way back to the control specialist, and it doesn't look good for anybody. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that the distributors have part of, the installers have the hard part. They have to physically get it up and running and make it work. But the distributor has such a big piece in the middle that if you don't get that bill of materials right, there is a possibility of who is now covering the cost for those missed
Right.
devices, and you don't want to be stuck in the middle of that. So really having that understanding to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward and providing the system and providing enough information and detail so that there is a successful project.
And walking it back to the beginning, like you said, distribution touches both sides of this project need. And with the specialist, you need to be able to understand what the owner wants at the beginning, because if you don't
Mhm.
document what the owner wants, nobody else is going to know what the owner wants. And so as a result, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of additional charges added onto the project that may not be necessary. So having thorough documentation at the beginning, a good conversation with the stakeholders of the project, making sure you understand what they need, what they want for the system to be acceptable to their expectations is necessary. And that's what the specialist is there to do, is to help create that documentation, create that communication line between the end users and the rest of the team, such as the distributor, the person making the sale. So, there's all three of these are essential roles when it comes to a lighting control system. And that's why we have these three different tracks. We want to make sure that if you take this certification, you will at least have the tools for understanding how to make sure that your project is going to be successful. And you have either people in-house in your own company that are going to be the other roles, or who to reach out to get those roles filled in, because you need these roles. It's essential. But the benefit of this is that these are services you can charge for. You don't do
Mhm.
this for free. This is an
That's
added
right.
service you get to put onto the project because you are making sure that it is being done right. And people pay for that. People are willing to pay for that because they've had bad experiences with lighting controls.
Mhm.
Most people have had at least one bad story when it comes to lighting controls. And it's that reason why we're doing this, because we want to make sure that those bad stories are history. They're not present day. And so if you become an upstanding distributor, word will get around. Contractors will reach out to you and say, hey, I need a lighting control system. Can you put a package together for me? It is a very attractive feature of being a distributor. And it's kind of almost a first step to becoming a dealer if you even want to go the extra mile and do what Ron is doing. You know, so it's all really part of this cohesive ecosystem that we're putting together here. And as a result, we hope that you're going to get a lot of information and education out of this. You're going to find that you're able to do your job a lot more effectively when it comes to lighting controls. And if you want to, we're also going to be at the Dallas Market Center right before Light Ovation. So if you want to go to Light Ovation and check out the Dallas Market Center, I highly recommend it. Dallas Market Center is a really cool permanent showroom space for lighting manufacturers to be able to show off what they have. And Light Ovation is a really great opportunity to check that out. You will be registered for Light Ovation if you register for this. So you don't have to pay extra for that. We also have information on how to get hotel accommodations, everything else. There's a lot of details on the website. Definitely recommend checking it out. We do have early bird pricing going on right now, which is going to end March 31st. So take advantage of that if you can, because we're going to bump it up by another $100 for registering for this if you missed the early bird. But regardless, if you do have questions, if you do have thoughts about this, please reach out. We want this to be a resource that's going to help you and help the industry succeed when it comes to lighting controls. So, thank you, gentlemen. As far as this certification goes, I think this is the perfect team to teach this, because we've got experienced design, we've got experienced distribution, and we've got experienced installation people at the helm doing the instruction. And I really hope that people are going to take advantage of that, because that's what we're here to do. We really want you to get the most out of this.
Very much looking forward to it, Webster.
Yeah, it's going
Thank
to
you,
be a
Chris.
ton of fun,
Ron.
and there really is going to be just so much to this, and so check it out. Absolutely, take a look at the information. Go to the website. Like I said, if you have questions, please reach out. We would love to chat with you, and happy to talk to you about why it's important. And if you're on the fence about it, let us help you with that if we can. And it really is going to be super valuable to people who are trying to get more into controls in any aspect of this. And again, if your organization is looking to get more into controls, you could potentially send one person to each track and cover the entire gamut. And that's not a bad idea. Even if you're not doing installation now, having that person will really help both the person doing the design and the person doing the distribution. Because if you have someone and you can work as a team cohesively, it really helps, because the designer doesn't always understand all the intricacies, oh my gosh, of how a system goes together, right? But the installer does. And then same thing with the distributor. They understand how to get through all that, and they can help the designer with, hey, this is great, but we need to make a couple of tweaks to really solidify your design to system A or system B, or what was your intent. So it really could be beneficial to have someone cover all three, and so that you can really create a really strong team within your organization.
Yeah, especially if someone wants to consider themselves an integrator, somebody that has
Hmm.
the ability to look at specs,
Yeah.
to see what
Yep.
was quoted, to see what was sold, and work with the installer to make sure that they come out with the sequence of operations that was specified on the job.
Absolutely. Well, I think Webster said it. I think we've covered everything that we need to on this. So I really, thank you guys both, obviously, for jumping on this. I'm super excited to be part of the team. So thank you for inviting me to it as well. Really looking
Mhm.
forward to working on this with you guys. And again, if anyone has questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We'd love to chat with you. I will close us out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair. We will see you guys there in the beginning of May.
And it's also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com, or check out nailed.org/ls-c to learn more about this. There is a link in the description. But hopefully, we will see you at this certification, virtually and in person. Thank you so much for joining us. And gentlemen, thank you. This was a great conversation about the certification.